think this one today are questions that have intrigued me for some time.
Yes.
And what I wanted to ask you about is, it strikes me that when you talk about or quote certain people in our conversations, certain ones you have a clear affinity for and a gratitude for their influence on you, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about when and how that happened and what were the key features that came out. And the people that I'm thinking of right now, there may be others, but the ones that occurred to me is Berdyaev and the Cappadocian Fathers, Gregory and Nazianzen, those folks, and Basil and those guys.
And the reason, Bob, the interesting thing is that, and the Greeks had something in their thought. They believe in the pre-existence of the souls.
Yes.
And they believe that in this pre-existence there was certain awareness, there was certain knowledge that the souls grasps over in that realm, and then when they were transmuted or transformed into existence, there was certain forgetfulness. And what I'm trying to say, Socrates said, I have nothing to teach you, I have no knowledge of my own to teach you, but by questioning, that's what philosophy is.
Mm-hmm.
Philosophy is an attempt to raise right questions, mm-hmm. which would trigger certain memory,
yes,
or certain awareness.
Yeah.
And he said, I have nothing to teach you, but I could help you to remember.
Uh-huh. Okay,
and
that's great. Remember the stuff they'd forgotten.
And each one of us, ourselves included, from the time we started reflecting or being puzzled by life and awareness thereof, we, however dimly, we perceive that certain things are there, but we possess them, but we don't understand them.
Okay.
We possess them, but we don't we don't understand them. And then, and really, this whole business of education is not so much we think, and I have come to the conclusion, we think that certain people claim that they come to teach us Christian truth or Mohammedan truth or Buddhist truth. They think they give it to us, but in fact, what they give us, Bob, they give us method of or give us scheme of ideas by means of which we could articulate those things.
Yes, okay.
They don't give us the spirit quote, but they give us way in which we could make intelligible to us, or they give us vocabulary, or give us language. That's why people were fascinated by Paul Tillich, theological students, because he gave them the language.
Yes, yes.
And out of...
but they already, for something they already had, or experienced.
He gave them the language to articulate something that's inside themselves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I myself, for a long time, thought that together with this articulation, those things that we come to believe, or that they take hold of us or grow within us, I thought this was born by way of when we articulate, we give birth to those things, but we don't. The deepest things in us are not born by way we articulate them, or the knowledge that help us to articulate them.
Right. They precede
they are driven. We are driven to certain knowledge or certain. You see, I was thinking about you and your artistic things. Certain artists that influence you. They gave you they did not give you the creative act, but they gave you the idea how to manifest the creative act or express it.
See. Yeah.
And those people who happen to speak to your conditions or to your imagination more clearly, these become your teachers.
Okay.
But what these people gave you, they gave you idea how to articulate.
Okay. Yeah.
And because although without articulation, this thing that's in us wants to be born, but cannot be born without without the process of opening it up or enabling you to open it up.
I see. Yeah, I see that.
And so that's why we are anxious, or why we get fascinated, as you did with the theologian in California that's in the Buddhist dialogue.
Oh yes, John Cobb. Yes.
John Cobb.
Yeah.
You see, because John Cobb was helping you to articulate something that's inside you that you want to articulate, or something that, or through this articulation, to find a way in your consciousness as something that supports you rather than something that torments you.
Yes. Oh, good. That's exactly right.
That torments you. And I was, whatever I had inherited or was given in my I was always tormented by it because I could not articulate it.
Yeah.
And it is like a dumb person who has desire to speak and cannot speak.
Yes.
And cannot, and they are frustrated, and so that's why these psychologists or whoever help such people to, for instance, Helen Keller.
Oh yes.
You know, she was mute,
Blind.
blind and mute, and there came these wonderful women that taught her how to express herself, gave her vocabulary, gave her system of articulating to herself, and she became famous.
Sure. Yeah.
Otherwise, she was banging her head.
Yes. Yes.
And so this is where education comes in. Education is both is not giving us the truth or energy or something that's in us that is really a fuel, but this fuel has to be ignited. And when it's not ignited, it becomes unenergized substance of whatever vehicle, human or and
Sure.
so this knowledge that we acquire is really igniting or helping this pre-existent knowledge or inherited knowledge to come to our aid to function within us.
Sure. Sure.
And so what we are looking for, we are looking for technicians who will help us how to best ignite the fuel in us.
That's great.
And each one of us has some teacher or it may be very often people found it in the ordinary, not so much formally educated people, but people of wisdom who, on the basis of the experience, self-taught people who have somehow helped themselves.
Yes.
And then they transmit these things to the younger friends. That's why you miss your father, because through your relationship with him, you learned how to ignite or make an opening for this inner self to be born with you in such a way that you find how to navigate life. And those who have done that to us, there are special benefactors. And in my case, in my case, I told you how desperately I was looking for the way of educating or getting education that would really help me to get hold of myself.
Yeah.
Concepts and ideas and to be able to impose upon the world around me certain scheme like a map. When you have a map, the place doesn't frighten you because you know the roads.
That's right. Yeah.
Otherwise, if you don't have a map to know the roads, you feel you are in prison in 5390 Boulevard place.
Yeah.
And since I was, I don't know how that, Bob, how that came about, but is I wouldn't call it, Berdyaev says, I'm not really so much a religious person as I'm a mystical person.
Mm-hmm.
And I have something of that kind, not sufficient to be able to initiate others, to be a guru.
Right.
But I have certain inner compass. Of the not so much religious kind, but of the mystical. Religious and mysticals are connected, except that religion is external.
Yeah.
You sing the hymns,
Yeah.
you perform rituals and so on.
You say the right words.
You say right words. And the mystic really, I tolerate those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tolerate those things, but I see behind those things something that makes those things to be expressed.
Right. Okay.
And I am interested in that. I'm in touch with that reality behind the symbols.
Great.
And I relate through the symbols to the reality behind them. But Bob, many people gave to these realities concepts and ideas and names and so on. And I'm not so much interested in the names. Sometimes I borrow the names of others, but I'm always interested in my own way of formulating them or understanding them. And Berdyaev, I think, helped me because behind his words and concepts, philosophical concepts as freedom and other things that he talks about, I feel that he's the man who talks about these things from an inner experience of himself and of those realities which interest me, you know. And so Socrates talks about himself. He says, I cannot give birth. inured to those things, but I'm midwife.
I'm a midwife.
I'm midwife.
That's great.
And we need these midwives to help us to give birth, or to formulate, articulate, or to bring to life instead of stillbirth, the living birth, you know. And the reasons why these people that I talked to you about, and all everybody who comes in our world contributes to this, but there are certain people who, because they have formulated so clearly for themselves or expressed in a system of ideas, philosophical, spiritual, and so on, there are midwives, and it's about, you asked me, who were your midwives?
Yes, I guess that's right.
And so these people that you mentioned, they are important to me. I am captivated by the person of Jesus. I mean, as a transcendent being, although he made upon earth. And I mean, people discuss Jesus from various angles, but for me, he stands or he brings to me, to my consciousness, to my spirit, to my whatever I am. He throws his lamplight on the ultimate, on the divine, and I'm fascinated by this, because through him I'm aware of the ultimate, or consoled by it, or inspired by it, or by the ultimate, the reality that we call God, and because of that, I'm captured by this Christian vision, or I don't know how to call it, but this light on the ultimate that apprehends me, where Jesus is both conduit and the center, because conduit, he leads me to it, and yet, and he is there in the center of it,
sure,
in what we call the deity or God, and so on. And since I'm committed to the vision of life, the rays of which, the rays that lighten my path, come through Christ. I'm committed to Christianity, and because I'm committed to Christianity, Bob, I always look who are these rays, these agents of Christ that throw the light on him. Because saints are really just rays, and because if it weren't for these sun rays, we couldn't see the sun. We see the sun because of the rays.
Right.
And I'm grateful I'm grateful for this rays of divine divine apprehension, or I don't know
Sure.
what the word I could use, and the early in the early church, the word is these people who were grasped by Christianity, fathers of the church or early teachers, but Bob, they realized that what was given to them through Christ, they realized that this was different from Zoroastrianism, different from Judaism, and they had to create an independent kind of vocabulary or knowledge or doctrine about it.
Yes.
And since I am apprehended by the same reality that apprehended the person of Christ, I looked to them as the, well, you see, when you contemplate the United States of America in the physical, geographical sense, Clark and Lewis, we always thought about, because they were pioneers.
Yes.
In the exploration of, and
sure.
in as much as America fascinates us as a physical or geographical thing, especially in terms of that unknown part to the earlier settlers, Clark and Lewis are always will be guides.
Yeah. See, sure.
And so Lewis and Clark's, in terms of another geography, of another realm, these are these fathers of the church, Basil, Gregory, Origen, Augustine, all of them, and that's why I always say how felicitous and fortunate was for me that people ask me, did you, as a church historian, did you teach Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox Church history? I said, no, I taught history of Christianity.
Yeah, sure.
Because all these various dimensions, they are all reflections in their own way of that ultimate thing that made possible our own particular groups, but they spring from the same source. And that's why I speak affectionately about people like Ronald.
Yeah.
And because although his vocabulary and the way that he put intellectual or philosophical or cultural spin, disciple spin, but I felt that he was doing this not so much for propaganda's sake, but of trying to this idiom to initiate human being into the same kind of ultimate reality that's common to us.
Sure.
And that's why I'm grateful that I studied, that I was initiated into the story of Christianity inclusively. And that's why, for instance, because of that, you see, although we belong politically to different groups, it doesn't matter to me, because through you I perceive that we have the same kind of relatedness to that makes your life as a person, although a disciple or myself, although this makes it what it is in such a way that we feel so close to each other.
Sure, of course.
And
amazing.
And that's why in the preface to my book that you were kind to publish, I quoted Roman poet Terence. Nothing human is alien to me, and I said nothing Christian is alien to me.
That's good.
And
So
and that is that's why I was. Although there are, fortunately, there are disciples who feel that I was given what's the word, bad press by some disciples, because and the reason why I'm disappointed, because I was, although I was described as a carpet bagger, you know, that I was trying to, that I was trying to exploit my presence among the disciples, some private interests, which, you know, I did not.
It's a ridiculous thing to think. Yes.
So, yes. To make, what did I say?
It's like prescription, or
yes, to make modules.
Oh, models.
Yes,
that's right.
models.
Yeah.
And so, really connected with what we were talking about, helping human beings to find a language, to formulate, to give some understanding of this inner intuition or whatever it is.
Yes.
And so it's with surgery. I mean, these people are, especially in surgery, or people are really shooting in the dark.
Oh, they are, aren't they? Yes.
Yeah, and on the basis of the accumulated knowledge. But the interesting thing, Bob, is bigger circle of consciousness or awareness or knowledge is, bigger is the circle of ignorance outside there, you know.
Yes.
So there are no. I was talking to the doctor, and they were ready to operate. I said, well, just take it easy. I'm not going to sue you.
Good. Well, that's good.
So,
oh my.
So.
Well, I do hope that the next one is. Is good.
They are. I have a lazy eye, which I see about 60% less.
Oh.
And the doctor who originally operating on my cataract. He said it is not important to operate on the other side eye because you don't see much on it. He left it, but this one says, well, I might help you to get a little bit more vision, so I'm going on Monday.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Well,
so
we'll pray that it's a success for you.
Well, I have short view of these things. I'm anxious to do justice to origin, because, but it's a very slow process. Unfortunately, my scholarly side has suffered greatly, because as soon as I went into the retirement, the terrible things started happening in that country where I was born, and
yes.
and I was born among those people, and fools though they are, I was sorry for them.
Sure.
And I grieved about them, because the other day was somebody. Oh, Robert Kaplan is a writer who writes on the international affairs for the Atlantic Monthly, and he was discussing problem of colonialism in our time, and what happened in Yugoslavia. And he said, these are former colonialists who created this situation to create economic colonialism. You split these countries like Yugoslavia, and so you create these satellites.
Oh my goodness.
These, whatever you call them, these clan states.
Client states.
Clan states.
Yeah.
And
that's pretty
you
good.
know, what do you do to clan states? You sell them things. You
exploit them.
You exploit them. And I was sorry that happened to the very people among whom I was born, and so on, and being being a situation that they themselves could not protect themselves, but cooperated with these these puppeteers.
Yes, they did.
You know, and this fellow Cole. It was interesting. I gave it to Valerie. I would, since you're an artist, Cole is German chancellor.
German chancellor, yeah.
And he's having difficulties.
Yes, I heard.
Yeah, I heard it. But in the Time magazine, there was his head was described as a big cabbage. You know, looks like a cabbage. Yes. And there was a can of cut shredded cabbage, coleslaw. And this fellow was responsible for nudging Croats to break up Yugoslavia, because Germany wanted clients, their clients, and he was asked why he was doing that. Oh, he said, in Germany we have 500,000 Croats, and they wanted to vote for us.
Oh.
But you see, Bob, what's the saying? The mills of God's
Grind slowly,
slow, but
exceedingly fine.
and it was interesting. It was interesting in the 4th century. There was famous rhetorician. He was a pagan, and the emperors, in order to honor the capital, they would appoint professor of rhetoric, and rhetoric was a summation of literature, of law and philosophy.
Oh.
And the emperor at that time was Diocletian, and he found, I think he was North African, a man called Lactantius. And this Lactantius was taken to Nicomedia, where he was the imperial professor, but he was converted to Christianity. And the Diocletian, who was tolerant of Christianity, turned against Christianity, and poor Lactantius went to Constantine, who ruled in the western part of the empire, not lose his own life, but he wrote a book, How the Persecutors Died. And he talks about all these Roman emperors who kept persecuting Christianity, who came to bad end.
Oh my goodness!
And one of them that he describes them all, but one of them, Valerian, was captured by Persians because Persia and Roman Empire were the rivals, in the same way that the Soviet Union and Russia were until recently, and even now. And he was captured by Persians, and his son Gallienus did not want to redeem him or buy him.
Really?
He left him there, and every time that the Persian emperor, Sapor, so and so, there were many of them, when he had a parade, official parade, and in those days it was not Mercedes but the horses. This fellow would be brought in chains, and he had to bend himself so the emperor would get into the saddle.
Oh my goodness!
So
he was how he climbed up on the saddle.
he climbed. And so what happened to Cole reminded me of that.
Isn't it something?
And I have forgot his. He had forgotten his name, Bob.
Cole is.
But there was just when these things started, when these NATO started making these client states, there was a Belgian, I forgot, he was the secretary of NATO, and he was so vociferous about Serbs and so on, and soon after he was accused of embezzling something, and he lost his position. So I'm keeping eye on these
persecutors, and how they. What end do they come to?
The interesting thing about history, Bob, history doesn't repeat itself mechanically, but it gives you an idea of what goes on, what comes around, what goes around, comes around. Comes around. But anyway, it was interesting. I wasn't called United Germans, but went destroying little peoples like stupid Croats, Serbs, Muslims, Bosnians.
Yeah.
And anyway, the reason why I was telling you about these things, these touched me deeply because although you don't live in Texas, things that happen down there that are negative, and you feel sensitive to, because this is your cradle, this is the womb in which, and so I spend a lot of time writing letters to the world politicians, presumptive of me, but you feel just because you could articulate certain things.
Sure. Yeah.
So
well, I'm glad you do.
My scholarly side is.
I haven't worked on my
life. You are executors of my literary executors.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, I'm anxious for you to see how it is coming out. It reads beautifully. It reads beautifully, and the ideas are so fine, you know. And I didn't find it accessible when there was a lot of early English in it, and now I've standardized the modern English more in it, and it has a fine quality that really touches me.
The man who, although he made his translation at the beginning of the century, but Celts, and you have something Celtic in you.
Yes.
They are poets, you know, and they have feeling for words. And Arta Christ, you met Arta, didn't you?
Yes. Yes.
His father wrote, still have it, one of my girlfriends in England gave me a copy of his book, which is mentioned in that obituary, Jesus the Teacher, and the sheer poetry.
Yes. Oh. I thought it was amazing when I read the obituary, because it says that if a position as head of a college became open, people would come and compete for the position. Yes. And he competed for it, and he was the youngest in competition, and he was 20 years old. He was the head of this college.
Yes.
It's a amazing thing.
He was a remarkable man. He was a repentant liberal, rationalist, you know, who people put a lot of myths around miraculous things, and the thing about Ark of the Covenant. Yes. Apparently, it was in the hands of the Philistines.
Yes.
And Philistines who guarded this Ark of the Covenant. Some illness happened to them, and they, being superstitious people, he said to the judge, "Take this thing, because it's bringing curse on us." And he said to me, people think seeing these things divine intervention, but he said what was actually happening, whatever was inside the flies got hold of it and spread bubonic plague.
Oh my goodness.
That's what was him.
Oh, I see. That was his interpretation.
That was his
I see.
I mean,
rationalist interpretation.
That's what rationalists do, you know. And more power to them. And but I heard an interesting interview yesterday, Bob. Gore Vidal, or
Yes.
Oh, he's an American writer.
An American writer, yes.
And he was interviewed on the public radio, but
He's an aristocratic liberal.
yeah, aristocratic liberal.
Yes.
And the interesting thing, the way that he discussed our situation, he said, we are fools. We are destroying ourselves by wanting to rule the world, and we have put forces in Japan, all over the world. He said, that's stupid. We are destroying ourselves. Mm-hmm. And what happened, Bob, to the Russians? They wanted to spread communism.
Yeah.
And by spreading communism and investing, of course, when you spread something, you invest yourself and spend yourself.
Yeah. Bankrupt.
And bankrupt themselves.
Yeah.
And we are doing the same to
yes.
us.
I know.
I mean, with all due respect, what is Bosnia and Kosovo and Golan Heights and Sinai Peninsula to us? Bob, we are little that we managed to earn. We are investing. If those people wanted to break each other's heads, if they are stupid, let them.
It's amazing. When we were in Canada, I said, how can a small country like this afford to have a health system for all the population? And the reply was, well, when you don't have an army spread all over the world, you can afford lots of things.
Of course, remember that.
Yeah.
And I mean, charity begins at home.
Right.
And somebody wrote in the Indianapolis Star a letter, said, this is stupid, using our army to promote one's own ego and aggrandizement that Clinton does.
It's amazing.
It doesn't make sense, Bob.
Yeah. It's
and
hubris.
The hubris.
Yeah.
Absolute hubris, and we have.
But his advisors all advise him to do the same thing. They all agree.
Oh, of course, because advisors are those people who tell you what you like to hear. I mean, it's from history you learn that the advisors who are true advisors, they stand up and say, look here, this is disastrous for us, and they lose their heads,
Yes.
But those careerists, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, they say, you want to commit suicide? That's the best way to do it. I mean, that's why we, Bob, in this country, we are very cynical.
Yeah.
We are very cynical, and the reason for that is
we've seen so much
materialistic society has rhetoric of altruism, but we are not altruistic, Bob.
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joyce just went down to Mexico with her on a 10-day program, talking to people in churches, and a man in Mexico City said to them, I thought it was an interesting thing. He says, America is always happy to loan us money so that we can create businesses to compete on the world market. He said, but we have to pay them back, of course. And he said, can you imagine our little country coming up with a business that can compete with the Americans? He says, how could you think we could possibly do that? We don't have the education, we don't have the infrastructure, yes. We don't have any materials, we don't have anything.
Yes, and it appears great humanitarian ideas.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Well, sure, we'll loan you whatever you want.
Well, yeah. And absolutely, he was.
Yeah, exactly right.
You know,
my feeling is that every time the powerful get near the powerless lose.
The powerless lose.
Yeah.
And
I think that their best bet is to stay clear of power.
Absolutely. And what they did, Russia was had gobs of money because state owned everything.
Yeah.
And they changed, and the Americans said to them, now we will teach you how to prosper free market. And they took American advisors, and now they are bankrupt.
Oh great. Yeah. But we talked about the communism as a religion with an ethic of coercion. I think that
yes.
was your phrase. I liked very much what he said. But it seems like now, he says, if they were so used to coercion, they are perfectly happy for gangsters and black marketeers and mafia to run the show over there in Russia now. I mean,
but at the same time, this mafia is squeezing out the majority of people.
Yes,
previously they have ideological oligarchy.
Yeah.
And now they have mafia oligarchy.
They said that every business in Russia pays protection money.
Yes, protection money.
That's unbelievable.
Yes.
And if you're in the parliament, you can't be sent to jail. So all of the mafia figures are joining the parliament. And they're promising anything to get elected.
and you see what they do. Yeltsin picked up this man because he was in position to do so, this Putin man, and one of the things that Putin had to do is to absolve Yeltsin from any,
that's right.
And that happened. That's by Ford.
Yeah, and Nixon.
Yeah. And the reason why Clinton is anxious for Gore to be in the saddle.
Oh, so he can be a partner.
Of course.
Oh,
of course.
Goodness. Oh,
of course, you see, that's how these things.
Isn't that?
I'm sorry to be cynical, but.
I know. Well, Russia's situation is terrible. They said that just thousands of soldiers are dying in Chechnya, the
yes.
Russian soldiers, and it's such a meaningless, ridiculous thing, and yet, and it's costing lives,
Yeah. But the unfortunate thing, Bob, is catch 22.
Catch 22.
We created we defeated the Russians in Afghanistan
Uh-huh.
we created Taliban, we created
Oh. Oh yeah.
So
So we armed all these people.
we armed these people,
Yeah.
and now we complain about Bin Laden. What comes around goes around. And but the unfortunate thing is that this whole thing has come with this rise of Islam, and put I don't know whether you follow the news, but in Indonesia,
Yes.
which it used to be a Dutch
Yes.
protectorate or colony and so on. And because it was Dutch for a lot of Christian missionary activity there,
Yes.
we had students from Indonesia here
Really?
at the CTS.
I didn't remember that.
Yes,
Mm.
and
Mm.
what's happening now that the Muslims in Indonesia are killing Christians.
I heard that. I'm
And
amazed.
I was talking. You see how this whole ecumenical thing was an artificial kind of structure, because I was talking to Paul Crow, because he invested his life into this Christian solidarity, and sincerely too. But he absolutely was ignorant of what Muslims are doing to the Christians.
He was.
Completely. And somebody, a Serb, a publicist, he thinks that this Islamic thing is going to hit us one day. In Britain, the Prime Minister Blair, Tony Blair, goes to this gathering, Islamic, and saying what a wonderful contribution they brought to Britain.
Really? Oh, for goodness sake.
And now it is not politically correct to say anything against Islam. We are.
Salman Rushdie has to hide under the bed in Britain, but
Yes.
but they're supposed to have made a contribution, eh?
Yes, that's right. That's right, Bob. It's that's why I wished. That's why I told you out there. I wished our neighbors were Buddhists rather than Muslims. You know, I have. People are free to choose any religion they do, but the tolerance and the mutual respect of human beings for human beings, nobody has right to presume that he has power to destroy another life. And
unless you can create another life, you shouldn't destroy it.
Absolutely, and this, as you know, that's and that's lost. This all these
Completely lost.
loss of the transcendent consciousness of the mystery of life as God created, and that is why next time we ought to talk about the problem of the demonic in history and in life.
Okay, good. I'd like to. You know, you were talking about okay, let's do that for sure. You were talking about Islam meaning surrender.
Yes.
I think that was the translation.
Yes.
That was the title of our